They say the old archive, beneath St. S. Monastery, was built to protect the living from the dead, not the restless kind that clawed coffin lids, but the ones that history itself has rejected, names removed from records, faces blurred in photographs, voices that dissolve from wax cylinders when played. I did not believe such things existed until I saw the index. It was not part of any cataloging system approved by the Vatican. The handwriting was meticulous, as though the ink feared staining the paper. Every entry had 3 parts: a name, a date, and a single sentence, never more than 12 words describing the moment they were erased. The archivist who kept it, Father was not a ghost himself, but looked like one. His face was a parchment map of fine cracks and pale hollows, and when he spoke, his voice carried the dust of decades. These, he told me, brushing a finger across the column of names, are the people who were not meant to be remembered. I asked if it was a list of the excommunicated or perhaps victims of war. He shook his head. Excommunication leaves a record. War leaves graves. These leave nothing. His tone had the finality of a tombstone being laid. The further I read, the more absurd the entries became. Helene Durand, the 14th of March, 1842, removed after the 13th, Chaim Yakov Belenki, the 8th of December, 1919, spoken out of season Matthias Clay, the 2nd of May, 1781, witnessed the turning of the empty hourglass. Some of these, I said, sound like riddles. Not riddles, he replied. Instructions. That night, he permitted me to follow him down to the lower vaults. The air grew colder with each step. At the far end, lit by a single oil lamp, stood a row of cabinets, each containing a box carved with the name of one erased soul. I was not allowed to open them. You would not see what's inside, said Mila. You would see what should be missing in you. The oil lamp sputtered as though the flame were suddenly afraid. That was when I heard it. Faint, arrhythmic tapping from inside one of the cabinets, like fingers counting in a language I could not understand. Father S. eyes didn't move from mine. Once you hear them, he said, you've joined the index. That night, I could not sleep. The tapping had lodged itself in my skull, an echo that refused to decay. It wasn't random. There was a rhythm to it, a strange cadence like the syllables of a prayer never meant for human mouths. When the first bell of lauds rang at dawn, I found myself walking back toward the archive without conscious thought. Father was already there, though I could not recall passing him in the corridors. He stood with a key in his hand, the kind made for locks older than any of us. You shouldn't return, he said. But there was no surprise in his voice, only the resignation of someone watching a pattern unfold for the 100th time. No, the index has a way of keeping what it's taken. I asked him how the list began, and his answer was as careful as the ink in those entries. The first name was written before there was an archive, before the monastery, before the island itself was settled. Record keepers of every age think they are preserving truth. They are wrong. We preserve absence. He led me deeper, past the cabinets, into a stone chamber, no bigger than a sacristy. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding a single sealed jar. Inside each jar floated a scrap of paper with writing too faint to read. These are the last sentences of those who were erased, explained. Words are harder to destroy than bodies, as why they must be drowned. My gaze lingered on one jar in particular. Its paper was still crisp, the ink black and defiant, as though it had been placed there only yesterday. The sentence read, "The Archivist is the final name on the index." Before I could speak, the tapping began again, but this time it came from multiple directions at once. From jars and cabinets, and perhaps even the walls themselves. The air grew heavy, like the charged silence before lightning. Stepped closer, his eyes fixed on me. "If you read your own name here," he said softly, "would you leave? Or would you try to erase yourself before it does?" In that moment I realized there was no entry for me yet. 3 days passed, without another visit to the archive. Rather, 3 days passed in my recollection, yet I could not recall what I had eaten, whom I had spoken to, or whether the monastery bells had rung in their proper order. Time had begun to fold in on itself, like pages in a book creased by too many hands. On the 4th morning, I awoke to find a strip of paper beneath my door. It was the same ivory parchment as the index pages, with the same precise ink strokes. My name was written there, not my baptismal name, not the name on any official record, but the private one my mother used only once, in a whisper, the day she died. Below it, a date. Tomorrow. I carried it to Father, my hands trembling. He studied it as if weighing something unseen. Then the archive is chosen, he said simply. The question now is whether it remembers accurately or mercifully. I demanded to know who decided such things. If it was not God, the old priest gave a faint smile that contained neither joy nor kindness. God does not curate, he simply creates. Curation is the work of archivists. That night, I returned to the jar room alone. I moved from shelf to shelf, peering at the drowned sentences. Some floated upward as if to greet me, their words forming shapes my eyes could almost understand. And then I found it, a jar at the very back, sealed with wax so fresh it still glistened. Inside was my own hand, my own ink, my own script. Writing a line I had not yet lived to compose. The index ends when the archivist forgets his own name. A sound rose in the dark, not the tapping this time, but the slow creak of a door opening in a place where no door should be. Cold air spilled through the shelves, carrying with it the scent of wet stone and candle smoke long extinguished. I knew then that whatever lay beyond was not meant to be entered by the living. But the date on that slip of paper left me little choice. Tomorrow would come, and with it, either my erasure or my ascension into the archive itself. The day came without the courtesy of dawn. The sky beyond my cell window was a slab of unbroken gray, neither morning nor night. I dressed in silence, the slip of parchment, my private name, and my appointed date folded into my palm. My feet carried me, unbidden, to the archive. Father was waiting, though he gave no greeting. He merely gestured toward the farthest aisle, where the shelves seemed to converge into a darkness deeper than shadow. There was no lamp, yet the way forward glowed faintly, as though lit from within the very wood of the shelves. We reached the final row. There, on a pedestal of black stone, rested a single open ledger. Its pages were empty, save for the last line, written in a script I recognized as my own. Close the book only when you understand you were always inside it. The priest placed a key in my hand. Beyond this, he said, you will no longer wonder who keeps the archive. You will simply be it. I hesitated. The air here was heavy with the scent of old paper and rain-soaked earth. Somewhere in the dark, something breathed, slow, patient, unchanging. I realized with an ache in my chest that the jars had never truly held the memories of the dead. They were holding the archivists themselves, preserved not in flesh, but in the sentences they had chosen to record. I stepped forward. The darkness folded around me like a page turning. My breath became ink. My pulse became the slow tap of the unseen quill. In the last instant before the world stilled, I understood. The archive was not a place, but a pact. The names were never lost. They were simply waiting for a reader willing to remember. And then my own name vanished, replaced by silence, until someone years, centuries from now, pulled my jar from the shelf and read me back into the world.